Christian parenting. So, you're having a baby.
I'm Craig Dennison.
And I'm Rachel Dennison. And today on So You're Having a Baby, you're in for a treat. We're covering the topic you're probably most worried about: sleep. We have asked the incredible Lindsey McGonegal to join us today and offer her amazing expertise. Lindsay is the founder of Little Lamb Childhood Sleep Consultants and is a certified baby and toddler sleep consultant.
As a mom of 3 girls with decades of childcare experience and degrees in psychology and pastoral care, she brings a unique perspective that will help you make life-changing improvements to your little lamb's sleep and yours. We know that parenting a newborn is real hard, but Rachel and I are here to help. Well, Lindsay, so glad that you're here to talk with Rachel and I today. We've been excited about this conversation with you since we first put this on a document to plan this conversation, and so grateful that you said yes to be here with us to talk about how parents with newborns can try to find a way to get some sleep in that season. So thanks for being here.
You're so welcome. It's so great to be here.
Well, so I'd love maybe to kick it off if you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got specifically into sleep consulting and how you started this amazing thing you're doing with Little Lamb.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm from California, but I live in Colorado now with my husband, and I have 3 little girls that are 5 and under. So I've basically been sleep deprived for a long time, but they all were horrible sleepers at first. Like as newborns, they just were the ones that were up all night and couldn't put them down and, gassy, fussy, crying. So we got really sleep deprived. But with my first one, with Googling and talking to moms and, talking to my sister, we decided to sleep train. And by 4 months, my first baby, Matey, was sleeping through the night. And so I was like, I got this. By the time the second one came about a year and a half later, I thought I could just figure it out on my own. But she, even to this day, is very strong-willed and very spirited. And so I just couldn't, for the life of me, figure out why she was still waking up all night. And so she was like very good weight. She weighed a lot. She was chunky. She was on a good schedule. She could fall asleep independently, and she was still up all night. So I had no idea what was going on. And so out of sheer desperation and with lots of skepticism, we just waved the white flag, hired our own sleep consultant. And that really opened my eyes to not just how complicated the world of baby sleep can be. It's not just about doing like these 3 things right. Like you got to do a lot of things right, especially for strong-willed, more difficult babies. And so that just totally changed my life when she got sleeping through the night. It was literally within a few days she was sleeping through the night for the first time. And I was a brand new person, and I just knew that I had found my passion, and it was the perfect integration of my background, which was in education and childcare and psychology and pastoral care to women. I'd basically done that for the prior 15 years before having kids. And so in 2017, I went through an intensive training program and then started Little Lamb right after that.
That is so cool. I just love hearing your story because I will tell you guys listening, Lindsay changed my life. Wesley was a really good sleeper. Like Wesley, our firstborn, we did Baby-Wise, which Lindsay probably knows about, of course, and just kind of were like militant and shut down all emotion and just sleep trained the mess out of him. And he was sleeping through the night by 8 weeks. That is not normal now. I know that is not normal, but I thought Wells, our second, was supposed to be the exact same. He sent me almost to the loony bin, and I'm not kidding, because he was up like 6 times in the night. After getting sick around like 3 months, he was like up all night long and got totally used to me getting up to nurse him constantly. And we used the Passy with him, which didn't really work for Wes, to the point that I called Lindsay and she was like, I think you need to just drop the Passy first. And it literally like changed my life when we bit the bullet and we just like went for it. So I just think you're amazing. I literally think the world of you and like love everything you're doing on Instagram too, and all your resources you're sharing with people who are like signed up for your email. It's just like amazingly helpful, and I've sent it to so many friends. So that's just me raving about you. But
Thank you.
I would love it. I'm serious, girl. I would love it if you could walk us through what sleep with a newborn is like, so people know what to expect a little bit more. Share a bit about the science behind sleep for little ones and why it's just so dang hard.
Sure. Yeah, it is really hard, which is ironic because newborns actually sleep a lot. Usually, like they're very sleepy, but they can sleep up to 18 hours a day, some even more than that. But it's often
Wow.
in short chunks of sleep. And if they do sleep a longer chunk, it's not necessarily during the times of day when you need to be sleeping. And they actually don't sleep very deeply. Like the deeper sleep cycles come later as their brain develops. And so they're in a relatively light sleep compared to like
Wow.
the deep sleep that we get into later as adults. And so they might wake up easily. And then their bodies are not regulated by the external world yet. So again, they might do their longest stretch of sleep from like noon till 4 and then be up all night. And so parents obviously are not on that schedule. And so that will get better in a few months, but there's not a lot you can do about that in the very beginning until they just get more natural light exposure and their bodies get used to, the natural rhythms that humans follow. So, but then on top of that, you have to worry about safe sleep a lot these days. A lot of, medical professionals will emphasize feeding
Mm.
them on demand, which then creates a need to constantly feed them, which has its place in the beginning for sure, but it's hard to get out of that habit. And so you can end up feeding them around the clock every 1 to 2 hours, like, literally through the night. And then also they just have immature digestive and nervous systems. So they're, gassy and squirmy and fussy and grunting all night long. And then they are also very sensitive to being overtired or just too much light, too much noise. All of that can make them hard to settle. And so the average newborn cries like 3 hours a day. Like that's normal. And so some babies will cry a lot more than that. So they, if they're crying, they're not sleeping. And so you're certainly not sleeping. So it really can all add up to severe sleep deprivation for parents. And that is true suffering. I mean, you've been there and I've been there personally with all three of my kids in the newborn stage. And it's just, a very hard thing physically, emotionally, and even
Mm-hmm,
spiritually. It can
mm-hmm.
create some really long, dark nights.
I remember in those days with Wells, I would have friends want to come, see me and hang out with me and the baby, and I would literally cry the entire time they were here because my nerves were just fried. And they're like, it's like someone empathetically looking you in the eyes and going, "How are you doing?" And I would just be like, "Oh, I'm so tired." But it was like this. It had gotten so bad that it was uncontrollable. To where
Hmm.
I remember talking to even our pediatrician, and she's like, "Okay, it's time." It's
Yeah.
time. I think that was around 5 or 6 months with Wells. Just a little bit of our backstory. We ended up having to just switch to formula. And I don't even know how much that really affected his sleep, but she was like, it's time for some extinction sleep
Hmm.
training situation. And that worked. It worked. And I finally slept and it was amazing. But sleep deprivation is real torture.
And I
For
remember
sure.
what you're talking about, Lindsay. I think really resonates with us. We in the first chapter of this book that we wrote, this workbook, it's a week on suffering and self care, and this tension that we live in. I think especially with the first kid, where maybe you're going from being a normal adult human and having your own capacities to make your own decisions, and then you get thrown into this season of having this baby that you have to take care of, and how stretching that process is, and it is just stretching, and there is kind of sleep deprivation and some suffering that goes along with that. But there's also this value for not losing self-care in the midst of that, which is why I love what
Hmm.
you do. But I think it's also this opportunity in self-care as it relates to sleep to maybe make some investment inside of how you can help care for yourself in this season and gaining some understanding, which is what you do such a great job with Lindsay around what are the options for helping your kid get to a better place with sleep while also acknowledging that this isn't going to be perfect and there's no solution to where they're just immediately sleeping through the night or whatever that looks like. And so I think you do a great job of holding those things in tension, which is why we're excited to talk to you today. So maybe as a start down that road, what do you see as kind of the options on the self-care side of what it looks like to help your baby get to a healthy relationship with sleep so that you can get some sleep or time to do the things that you need to do apart from just holding or taking care of the baby? So what do you see as kind of the options in the landscape of sleep advice that's out there?
Yeah, that's such a good question. I just love the idea of balancing self-care with obviously the needs of your child. And, even when we talk about self-care with baby sleep, it's like getting even a slightly reasonable amount of sleep for a new parent really shouldn't be optional. Like, for newborns, you're going to be sleep deprived. There's not much you can do about it. But I really recommend parents trying to get some more sleep as soon as they can because your body's just mentally and physically can't handle such severe sleep deprivation for so long. Most of the moms I talk to, they're literally running on 2 hours of sleep like at a time. And, maybe they'll get a 4 hour chunk in there, but like there's just so much good research to show the detrimental effects of that kind of sleep deprivation for even a couple nights, let alone weeks and months and even years for some of my clients. So it's really intense. But yeah, for newborns, like we do have to start with very realistic expectations because there are some newborns that will sleep through the night relatively early on their own, but it is still normal for them to wake up to eat every 2 to 3 to 4 hours in the very beginning, and then by the time they hit 4 weeks and then up to 6 weeks, you can start working towards like a 4 hour stretch and then a 5 hour stretch, and we really build slowly on that because we have to still meet all of their needs, and some of them do need to eat frequently still and all that. But at the same time, you can start working on more independent sleep habits where you do start to lay them down at least drowsy so they're not fully dependent on you to get all the way to sleep, because that does, and studies show very clearly that over time that does help them to naturally start to sleep longer at night. So they're not looking to you to get back to sleep all night. And so we, teach different processes to help parents kind of let go of that assistance a little bit and help their baby learn in a very gentle way, because for newborns we don't do any like cry based sleep training. We're really working on sleep shaping in the newborn stage, and so that's where you're using external factors to help mold their sleep into healthy sustainable habits. So external factors like sleep environment and the timing of sleep and feed. So following wake times, getting them down, at the right time for their nap and the right time for bedtime helps them fall asleep more easily. And then timing their feed so that you're not letting them snack feed all day long, because that does lead to snacking all night long and then you're up all night. So, there's a lot of external things we can do for newborns to really shape their sleep. And then once they get a little older and out of the newborn stage, there's a whole spectrum of sleep training methods, from very gradual, slow methods where parents are in the room the whole time and responding as soon as they cry and, all of that. And so for like parents that don't have a high tolerance for crying or feel stressed by that, or they, just want to be more on the gentle side, we start there. Other parents, and especially if I talk to a parent that's very sleep deprived and might not even have the stamina to follow a gradual method, we're going to start more on the other side of the spectrum that has the parent out of the room sooner, gives the baby more space to learn how to self-soothe, and that does tend to show quicker results where you start getting these long stretches of sleep within a few days or so.
Wow. Yeah, that makes sense. It's funny hearing you say all of this. It's like giving me deja vu. It's kind of weird the effect it's having on me. I'm like, oh my God, yes, a schedule. I forgot about how you really do have to like set a schedule for them. And that was like a game changer with both of my boys. So like doing like when they wake up, they eat right away. And then for those of you who are listening and like have no idea what I'm talking about, when the baby like wakes up at first, you feed them and then they get, based on their age and their size and all that, get X amount of time of like play time, awake time, stimulus, and then they go back down for a nap. And like how helpful that was with both the boys once I finally was like, no, this is what we're doing. Wells, you could tell he started like thriving after we did it. And I totally forgot about that. That's so smart.
Yeah, babies do so well with it, and parents do too, because then you have this time of day to get things done for yourself, to take a shower, to, eat something. And then that they're probably going to wake up around this time. You can actually plan to get out of the house and all of that. And I find parents that even if they weren't originally very scheduled people, they find that it's really helpful to have a schedule for a baby.
Yeah, it makes so much sense. It brings to mind something a mentor of mine said one time about parenting, which is the two biggest lessons you need to teach your kids is, number one, that they're loved unconditionally, and second is that they're not the center of the universe, which feel like these two ideas that would be mutually exclusive, but are so interconnected that you can be both incredibly valued and loved, but also not be fully the center of literally the entire world that you're
Yes.
operating with. But I find often it's like households, especially with babies have this power to become almost like a new center of gravity for a whole household of adults, where whatever they need or want or whatever the experiences are, it's literally everyone is just hovering around this newborn. And something we've been trying to communicate in this workbook and in the podcast is that there's this relationship that's developing. And I think even with babies, there obviously is this immense care that's needed. And that's an amazing opportunity for you as parents to meet the needs of this baby. It's so sweet. And to teach them that I'm here for you and you're loved. But there also is this reality that in order to be able to even do that well, you also have to care for yourself. And that idea of a schedule, I think, is such a great practical tip to say, even with a baby, you can kind of help nudge them in the direction of something that's both good for them and good for the family, even if that's not something they necessarily always love right off the bat. This thing of,
Right.
I am putting you down here and, I'm here for you. And if you start crying, I'm going to be there for you. But I am going to kind of nudge you in this direction as a parent now, kind of like the way we would think of doing that for our toddler. When my toddler wants to run out into the middle of the road and do something, I'm going to help him realize that, hey, that's not best for you or best for us. Or if he wants to, jump off this really high ledge and he's super excited, or he loves riding a scooter down these really steep hills. So we try to find the right balance of kind of directing him into something that's safe and good for him and us. And
Yeah.
I think that can happen with babies too. And that's what I love partly about what you do is this idea of helping parents value themselves and their baby and hold in tension this care for the kid, but also care for themselves and a schedule and this value for your sleep and their sleep. And that guidance process, I think, is really great. And is something that a lot of families don't think through or take advantage of.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I wanted to ask you if you, just based on the whole schedule thing, do you have any, resources you have made or would recommend to help parents set a schedule, or even any books that you find really helpful around that type of thing?
Yeah, that's a good question. We work to customize schedules for our clients directly. And so although I do have an ebook and some resources on my website that give very specific schedules per age, that's kind of a starting point. And so we go from there. There's a lot of books out there on sleep, but they do all have a different take on what the best schedule is. I find that mine work really well, the schedules that we use, because they're based really scientifically on baby's biology. So when we're talking about setting a schedule, we're not asking the baby to do anything that isn't in their best interest physically. We help them to fall asleep during the times of the day that they will most easily fall asleep. And, we help them sleep overnight and fall asleep for bedtime at the times where it's going to work with their natural sleepy hormones and all of that. So I don't know of a book out there besides my own resources that actually recommend the schedules the way that I would recommend them.
I feel like, you know what? I remember I downloaded that ebook and I remember I saved the chart that you made as a screensaver on my phone and sent it to my mom play group. So I do feel like I remember seeing something specific like that for those of you listening to go to her site and check it out.
Yes, we
Yeah,
have
that's so good.
a wake times chart for newborns, which tells you how
Yes.
many minutes to wait before going on. Maybe that's what you're thinking of. And then we have a nap chart for older babies that tells you how many naps per day, how many feeds per day and night. So it's a good guide. And
That's what it
all free on
was.
the resource on the website.
Yes, because as they grow, I feel like literally with both boys, it was okay, we're taking 2 great naps or 3 great naps. When they're really little. And then all of a sudden it's oh, now he wants to drop one. Oh, okay. Okay, well, we'll try and figure that out. And then it's now you only need 1 nap. Oh, okay. And just the whole process.
It
And now Wes is 4 and he's,
constantly.
yes, it changes constantly. And just having that as a guide was really, really helpful.
Okay.
Yeah, that's so good. I love what you're saying too, that the personalization process, and I think that's part of why what you do is so meaningful, is the ability to personalize to even what you said about even how sleep deprived is this person, what's their amenability to the baby crying or not. And that's something we've been trying to advocate inside of some of this podcast content. And the book is, even in the book, when we say here's a principle or a value or what we did, take that with a grain of salt and apply it to your relationship as a husband and wife, your kid. Every kid is different. And so while there's these really valuable principles and what I love about you is that it's based in science. There's science around newborn development. There's this opportunity for a couple to get to start their parenting journey, understanding that they have this great opportunity to be able to personalize how they care for their kids for what works for them and for their family.
Yes. Yeah, I love that. It's really an important part of the sleep plan process is that we don't ask parents to do anything that they're not comfortable with, because if they're not comfortable with it, if it goes against their philosophy, I mean, some parents don't want to let their child cry by themselves at all. And so we work with that. Like, we work to find a way for the parent to feel comfortable enough, like, not that it won't be an uncomfortable process, but comfortable enough that it's not going against their, internal convictions, so that they will be consistent and stick with it. Because if they quit, it's kind of all wasted struggle, and you don't want it to be wasted. You want it to be like for a purpose, which is to get everybody more sleep and get everybody more healthy.
Yeah, that's so good. So this may tend to be a stickier question, but I wanted to ask you how you see the benefit of both parents being involved in the sleep process, and why maybe this might tend to be a mom job rather than both parents actively involved, and how a dad can be supportive of a mom during the newborn phase and early months of sleep.
Yeah, so reality is like 95% of people who contact me are the moms, but I love it when I do get a dad who's super involved and he's out there helping his wife and doing the research and finding the solution. I get some of those really great dads too. So but it does tend to fall on the mom. And that's probably for a few reasons. Like, one, just if mom is breastfeeding, she's kind of the one that is there holding the baby, especially in the beginning, like all the time. So especially if the baby's nursing to sleep, dad automatically feels like it's just out of his scope. So he's just not involved in the sleep process. And then, even if mom isn't exclusively breastfeeding, she tends to be the primary caretaker in those early weeks and months. And she figures out what works for her baby. She's doing the online research. She's Googling the problems, talking to her mom friends. So she builds up her own confidence of figuring out what to do. And it just becomes easier for dad to step back, and mom does all the work around bedtime and nap time. So, nursing or not, the mom can just become a strong sleep association for baby. And dad tends to, be doing stuff around the house and helping with other kids and doing all the other things that need to be done. So it's just a natural thing that happens, but it is so great when dad can get involved. Like, there's huge benefits for the whole family. Not only does dad get to bond with the baby more, it gives mom a break, and it helps dad to build his own confidence with caring for the baby. Like, we want him to feel confident and not exclude him from that process. And so even in the sleep training process, I often recommend that the dad is the one that either does the check-ins or does the pickups in that process, because babies sometimes respond more quickly to dad. Like, they just it's like a way to communicate, you're not going to get nursed to sleep anymore, dad's here, so they just kind of get it a little faster. And some dads are a little better about sticking to the plan and not getting emotional in the moment, and not following the plan. Obviously, that's a generalization. There's some moms that are super, consistent about the plan. But I do find that dads tend to be like, oh no, I will make this happen. I'm going to follow the plan. I'm not going to let my wife go in too soon, or that kind of thing. So it makes for a really good team in the process.
I think too, even in that, it's like a way to protect your spouse, especially if she is sleep deprived, to be like, no, I'm not letting you go in there because this starts everything over again. I would love it, Craig, if you would share. I know this is kind of like off the cuff, but Craig, like, if you'd share what your experience was kind of like as a dad, like from the dad point of view, because you were really helpful and really sleep deprived too.
Yeah, sure. I'd be happy to share. I remember what you're talking about, Lindsay, with how much is on the moms, how much is on Rachel with nursing Wes. The whole way through until we got out of that season, and then with Wells for at least a few months. I think it's 4 months, something like that. 5-6 months. And so in that, I remember feeling kind of that sense of helplessness as well. Like, was the first sense of like, man, there's so much that only she can do that I can't do. And that's kind of hard because I want to help, and I see how much effort she's having to put in and how much is on her. And there's a sense, I think, when you feel kind of helpless, there can be a tendency to just say, well, then I can't help. So I'm out. I can't do the main thing. And so I'm going to check out and let this be hers. And I'll try to do the other things that I can, or I'll just really focus on work and kind of cover that. If that's kind of your family dynamic, depending on who's, bringing home the bucks for the family and all that stuff. And so I remember that sense of helplessness, but I think we worked out kind of a plan to where I would go in and get the baby and bring Wes or Wells to Rachel to nurse. And then I might like doze off while she is nursing and then pop up and did almost all the time. We tried to say, hey, let's stay awake and like be there for like support. I inevitably doze off, and then she'd wake me up and I'd take the baby back and try to put them down in the crib.
Yeah, and you would do diaper change. You would do diaper change.
Lots of diaper changes.
And I'll just say that's really helpful for anyone listening, because when you're recovering from either a C-section or a vaginal birth, it is not a joke, okay? Even just like getting out of bed to go get the baby to nurse them was like really brutal, honestly, with both boys, because I had both experiences and had a really bad tear. I'm just going to be graphic. I tore really bad, and my recovery with our firstborn was even longer than my C-section recovery. And so it was just a big blessing to me to have Craig go grab the baby, change his diaper, bring him to me to nurse, that sort of thing.
And we definitely didn't do that perfect. There's this one story that we love to share where I had brought Wes to Rachel to be able to nurse him, and I had dozed back off asleep, and she tried to wake me up to go take Wes back like 2 or 3 times, I want to say. And I kept just falling right back asleep. And then finally, I have no memory of this whatsoever.
No, because you kept saying to me, like, I'd go, babe, wake up. And you go, 10 more minutes. And I'm like, oh my God, really? And so I'm like, fine. And then I would kind of nod back asleep, and then I'd snap awake, like you do when you're sleeping, sitting up, and be like, Craig, wake up. And he just, I'm like shaking the man. So eventually I yelled. I said, Craig, wake up. And he's like, what? I'm like, wake up. I already gave you, and he said to me, 10 more minutes. And I said, I already gave you 30 minutes. Get out of bed right now. And he's like, oh, he's like so mad. He's like, that's exactly what I needed. Like acting like that was intentional and he was meaning to sleep those like extra 30 minutes.
But so funny. And then the next morning we woke up, and where my memory starts, because I have no memory of any of that.
Literally no memory.
Where my memory starts is waking up and just like every other morning and saying, hey, Rachel, good morning. How are you doing? And starting off sleep. And I remember getting this body language back of, oh no, she's like mad at me for something. And I have no idea what it was.
I was like, I'm still kind of mad at you. He's like, what? I was like, for last night, the way your attitude with me, like I was just trying to get some help, and you know, and he was like, oh my God, babe, I don't remember any of that.
Genuinely have no recollection of being so rude to my wife in the middle of the night. Sleep deprived Craig is not a good husband, not happy Craig, not helpful Craig. That is to be sure.
So just be prepared for that, folks. And have grace. Because
that's why we have a rule that nothing counts between like 11 and 7 a.m., 11 p.m. and 7 a.m. Because you're so delirious. Like you have so much sleep pressure that's just like begging you to sleep, and you just aren't, you just can't. And so it makes you do crazy things.
It's wise. Honestly, some of our worst like arguments were like that. Just literally in the middle of the night, like when the boys get sick or something and you're up all night long, like, oh my goodness. We've said things we definitely had to apologize for the next day.
Yeah. I think that's a really good rule is start to just be open-handed with that whole season with each other as a couple, and even with the little ones. Like in that whole season, there's just everything is tough. And so it's good to just be open-handed and be willing to let things go a little bit more easily, and that it will not be forever, even if in the moment really that it does feel like it will be.
We promise.
Yeah, that's good. So Lindsay, maybe for just another question, maybe drilling down to some practicals. What I love about what you said you do is this kind of customized personal plan. But if you're going to kind of paint a picture for some context for those that are listening, are there any do's or don'ts that you would say that parents should know from the start as it relates to sleep training? Because I think people just don't know what they don't know. And so even things, if you have any impressions about the use of things like sound machines or sleep aids like pacifiers, or we did blackout curtains in our room, things like that, like anything to kind of help the baby get to this place of sleep. This idea of if you have a thought of when they should move to a crib as opposed to be, sleeping in the room, what that looks like, or we always point out to a person, one of my coworkers is going right now through a 4-month sleep regression, which always hit us like just was such a tough season for us. You think you got them there and then they just start waking up again. So any maybe do's and don'ts or context that would be normalized across different people with personalized plans inside of sleep?
And I want to add, you mentioned earlier safe sleep, and I would love for you to touch on that as well.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I totally forgot about that being a thing as well.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we customize plans in a lot of ways, but there's some basics that are just going to be true for every baby because it's just how they're made. Like we wouldn't sleep great in a loud, brightly lit area where we're, not comfortable or that it changes all the time. We need something consistent. And for sleep, they really need a dark room. Like, within the first, let's say 4 to 6 weeks, I do recommend putting up blackout curtains, like using a dark sleep space, even for naps. It doesn't have to be as dark during the day, but it does help them settle to sleep. And as they get more aware and social, it helps them not just look around the room and try to, stay awake because they're just curious about everything. So a dark sleep space is really helpful even for naps, and for nighttime, it helps them start producing sleepy hormones like melatonin, and so we want the blackness to help that process. And then it also, even as babies get older and toddlers, like it really helps prevent early morning wake ups to have blackout curtains. So I definitely recommend that. And for white noise, same thing. Like it's something that the babies were used to in utero, was having like loud swishing noises, no real distinct sounds, but just kind of a constant noise from your body, from muffled external noises. And so it's really helpful for them to recreate the womb for them, which was dark and noisy. So we do the blackout curtains, we do the white noise. You want it to be loud enough that they can hear it over their own cries, because it actually helps soothe them, and then it helps them to stay asleep also. So it's a really helpful tool. You can get rid of it if you want after the first year, but I mean, most of my clients just keep the white noise because it's a positive sleep association, and it just helps prevent them being woken up from siblings and whatever other noises are going on in the house. So
that's real.
Love white
that's
noise.
Very real.
Yeah. So I still sleep with it.
We have one in our room now, probably because of the monitor noise though. But I was going to see if you had like a sound machine that you like or prefer. Even.
Yeah. Actually, so there's the they used to be called Marpac, but now I think it's Yoga Sleep. They changed their brand name, but it's Yoga Sleep.
The dome.
And they make the dome, which I do like for older kids, but I find it doesn't get loud enough for newborns. Like you can't raise the volume enough to like match their cries. And if you have a really fussy baby, you want it louder. So they actually make a different product that's a travel, like portable white noise machine. And it's called the Roam. It's like ROAM, I think. And I use that as our regular one, even though it's for travel. Like I have one for myself, I have one for the baby. And so if she needs to nap on the go, I just unplug it, it charges, and it's really small and lightweight, but it has a great sound. So that's my favorite. Like I use it all the time, but I do like the regular dome for like toddler sleep too.
That's super helpful. What about pacifiers?
Yeah. So pacifiers are like great until they're not, like they're super helpful if your baby will take to it in the newborn phase. They have a bit of a SIDS prevention. That's not really understood why, but it does help prevent SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome. And so if your baby will take it, it is recommended that you offer it at the beginning of naps and nighttime sleep. And it does help soothe them because newborns have such a strong suck reflex most of the time. So it's great if they'll do it. Not every baby will. I mean, I've only had one of my newborns even be interested in the pacifier, so you just don't know. But so if your baby is interested in it and it is helping them sleep, great. Don't worry about it. But you probably will hit the point in the near future where you find that you start replacing it all night long, or you have to keep putting it back in at the beginning of nap or bedtime. And at the point where you realize this is not helpful anymore, it's actually more harmful to all of our sleep than it is helpful, then I recommend just dropping it at that point. And I do usually, that point is usually between 3 and 5 months. And that's a great time to just cold turkey drop it. And I know that really scares parents, but like you said earlier, if you can just get through those first couple hard days, your into a place where you don't have to get up all night to replace it. Everybody's sleeping better. So that's what I would say about pacifiers. And once the baby's older, if you've kind of made it to 8 or 9 months and they still are attached to the pacifier, then you can teach them to find and replace it themselves. And so that you don't have to be the one going in and doing it. So you can keep it at that point if you want to.
Yeah, I've seen some of my friends got to that stage. We did not get there. It did not happen for us. But I was always amazed at like the babies that could just grab it and put it back in their crib.
Yep. Some babies figure it out really young, but usually it's closer to like 8 months, I would say. But yeah, so that's what I would say about pacifiers. About the 4-month regression, if you want me to hit on that real quick.
Please.
So that is, it's just a natural brain development phase. So you go from newborn sleep patterns to basically adult-like sleep patterns. And it happens, it's right in between like 13 to 17 weeks or so. So it's like 3.5 to 4 months is when it tends to hit. And that's based on gestational age. So if they were born early or late, you would adjust for that. And that's the same with all baby sleep. I'll just throw that in there that when I'm talking about like a 4-week schedule, if your baby was born 3 weeks early, they wouldn't be on that schedule until they're 7 weeks, if that makes sense, because sleep is neurological. And so that's not based on where you're living like your life. It's based on how your brain is developing. So all that said, 4 months sleep regression is actually a maturation in their sleep patterns where they actually start to wake up more frequently. So that's where you'll hear of like a newborn that slept so great at 8 weeks or 10 weeks, but at 16 weeks, they started waking up every 2 hours and taking bad naps and all that. And it's because they haven't learned to connect their own sleep cycles. So that is a great time to sleep train your baby and basically teach them to put themselves back to sleep all night so that you don't have to do that. And that doesn't mean that you would necessarily drop all night feeds. It would just mean that they would be putting themselves back to sleep at night when they don't need to be fed. And so it's, people think of it as a regression because it feels like that, but it is actually a maturation in their sleep patterns, which then helps them become, if you can get through that and give them the skills they need, then they can become great sleepers, which is good news,
So what is safe sleep? I heard you touched on that earlier and I was like, yes, that's important.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that is one of the things I would say is do prioritize safe sleep. It's really hard to do that sometimes if you have a baby that doesn't want to be put down. And with the safe sleep recommendations the way they are, you have to lay your baby flat on their back on a firm surface. And you don't want anything else in the bassinet or crib. They should have their own sleep space. No pillows, no extra blankets. I recommend swaddling for newborns for sure. And then there's a lot of popular products out there that are not actually safe for sleep, like DocaTots or Snuggle Me's, which people like, I feel like they get kind of mad when I say that, but it's just true. It's like putting a big pillow in bed with your baby. So it's just not safe. And so you do want to really prioritize that because really like if you have a healthy baby, the number one danger to him is sudden infant death syndrome. And it can be greatly reduced by following safe sleep practices. But you're so tired, it can be hard to do that because a lot of the safe sleep practices have babies and, basically you have to put them down to sleep and babies want to be held to sleep. So there's a lot of things you have to work to overcome to be able to do that and follow all of the rules. But I highly recommend doing it. Like you will just, I think, sleep better knowing they're sleeping safely. But it takes work to do it for sure.
Do you have like a favorite swaddle?
Oh yeah, I do, man. I've tried all the swaddles out there really, especially because she's almost 11 months now, but so I'm not that far away from my third newborn stage. So because of what I do now, I intentionally tried so many, there's like new products since I had my second child, so I really did like the Ollie swaddle, which is great for like a Houdini baby who can get out of any swaddle. Some of the ones that are like Velcro tend to be too loose, and the Ollie swaddle is also Velcro, but it has like a stretchy material that you can get it pretty tight even around a tiny newborn. You don't want it too tight, but like tight enough that they can't get their arms out and that will wake them up. So I love the Ollie. I do really like the Love to Dream arms up swaddle because some babies do really like to sleep with their arms up or like on their chest. And so it allows them to do that. And then I now have Junalee, my third baby, in a zippity, which is great for the swaddle transition because, once your baby starts to show signs of rolling or they're over, depending on what your pediatrician says, like 12 to 16 weeks, then you have to get them out of the swaddle for safety. And so the zippity is great because it's safe, but it does keep their arms kind of contained more. It's like the starfish design, if you can
That's
picture
what I was going
that.
to say. Is that the star one?
Yes.
Yes.
So those are great because you don't have to transition them out of it later. Like you can keep it as long as you want. So they do help with the transition. They keep them kind of contained, but they can roll on their tummies and basically they can crawl in it if they want to.
That's awesome. I think people will really appreciate your suggestions because there's so many options.
Oh,
There
that's
are.
so good. So maybe as we wrap up with the last question, I know that you said that the sleep consulting is kind of your ministry and you have a background in ministering to women. I think there's so many uniquenesses that you bring to the table. As you think about this season and this need for both the babies and the parents around sleep, is there anything spiritual that comes to your mind? Any encouragement that you would have for those that might be listening about this season? Any things that you spaces that you see God moving and working in the lives of parents and newborns in this season? Any ways that you'd want to encourage people?
Yeah, definitely. I love that question because it is really a spiritual battle when you're in this huge sanctification process of becoming a parent or adding another child to your family. It's just so exhausting and so trying. You've probably never been as exhausted in your life. You've probably never felt such physical pressure on your body and on your mind spiritually. And the encouragement for me, especially looking back after having gone through it personally and seeing it in my clients and in my friends and family who've gone through the sleep deprivation, is just to know that you are growing spiritually, even if you are not in your Bible every day, or even if you're not, spending time in prayer like you used to. Like God is sanctifying you. Like He is using the suffering for your good and His glory. And you are becoming a better mom just by getting through the day sometimes, just by leaning on the Lord and telling Him you're desperate for Him in the middle of the night, when your husband's sleeping next to you and you're just like, I don't know how to get through this. I'm going to totally lose my mind. But crying out to God, like He is sanctifying you through that process, even if that's the only time with Him you're spending, because He is faithful to do it. And it's not about your faithfulness of following the rules of quiet time, Bible reading, even church attendance, because the newborn stage, a lot of babies, especially with COVID right now, you're not going out to church. And so you just have to trust and rely on God for your sanctification and know that He is going to be faithful, and you will look back and see a harvest of righteousness from it. And so it really is the greatest way to grow, is by just dying to yourself daily, having a newborn.
That is so good. I'm so encouraged by that.
That's amazing. Yeah, it was part of what we do for our, another ministry. In addition to this, is this resource to help people spend time alone with God, and that's something I really want to clarify for people listening to this podcast that are venturing into the season with newborns. Is while there's this powerful opportunity to be able to meet with God, this is an incredibly tough season, and so it's like if you can find that rhythm, great, take it, but God has grace for us as His people all the time, no matter whether you have a newborn or not. I think that's an invitation, not an obligation. And so there's this opportunity that God brings just to connect with us throughout the day. That's even the goal, is this abiding connection. And so I think He's there with you, whether you know He is or He isn't. And He loves you in the midst of all of that. And like you said, Lindsay, He's working in and through you for your sanctification, for His glory and your good. And so I love that opportunity for people, especially in a season like this where everything's kind of changing, to get to kind of set aside some of the things that they've leaned on in the past that might be bringing them a bit of shame if they're not able to do those things now, or a little bit of frustration or additional sense of stress or worry or fear, that it's okay if life looks different. It will look different. And as a result of all of this, and God has grace and He loves you and He wants to meet with you in the midst of all of it, even in those little 5-second little turn your heart to God moments.
Yeah, amen.
Well, Lindsay, I'm sure this won't be the last that people want to hear from you. So as parents need sleep support literally all along the way, can you tell us a little bit about how we can get in touch with you and follow along with what you're doing?
Sure. Yeah, my website is sleeplittlelamb.com. And there's tons of free resources on there. You can meet the rest of the team of Sleep Little Lamb. I work with other consultants, and we, collaborate with our clients. And so there's tons of free resources there for baby and toddler sleep. We work with up to age 5. You can also follow us on Instagram at Sleep Little Lamb, and same handle on Facebook. So we do daily posts on sleep tips and encouragement and all of that there.
That's so great. Lindsay, thanks so much for your time. Thanks so much for your willingness to do this with your life as well as be on this podcast. You get to share and lend that expertise to Rachel and me and to anyone listening. Really, really appreciate you.
You're so welcome. It's great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of the So You're Having a Baby podcast. Thanks again to Lindsay for being a part of this conversation with us. Again, you can go to her website, sleeplittlelamb.com, to find more of her resources and links over to her social platforms. For more resources from Rachel and me around helping you be able to thrive in this season of parenting a newborn, be sure to get our book, A Parent's Guide to a New Baby. You can find that on christianparenting.org. We'd love if you would subscribe to this podcast to make sure that you get notified anytime new episodes release. Also, if you'd rate and review the podcast, that'll help other people be able to find this resource that desperately need it. And as always, we know that parenting a newborn is real hard, but we're here to help.